Okay, so here is the number one question that comes up when someone has a weak arm or shoulder or completely flaccid arm after their stroke. And that is, should I be wearing a sling? All right. So I'm going to tell you, like I tell every single patient I've ever worked with, and that is the only time that you should be in a sling is when you're either doing standing, some kind of standing, or walking. Because when your arm and shoulder are weak and you are standing, that is when gravity is going to be most intensely pulling on the weight of that arm, which is then going to be stressing your shoulder and potentially causing or worsening a shoulder subluxation when that arm bone starts to kind of come out of that, separate from that joint. Okay. So when you stand and when you walk, now you have options. If you're someone that is still needing physical assistance, like when you get out of bed, like going from a bed to the chair, or getting on and off the toilet, in and out the shower, like anytime you're transferring from one surface to another, doing just a quick pivot or a couple steps over, you have the option, again, if you have someone that's there assisting you, to have them physically support that weaker arm under the elbow and forearm to keep that shoulder position. Because if you're just kind of taking a few seconds to go from A to B, that's fine. You don't have to go through the whole process of putting on a supported sling just for those few seconds. But you do have to have some support, or should have some support, on that weaker side anytime you're standing. So whether that support's going to come from a sling or if it's going to come from somebody assisting you, you just need to make sure that that's happening in some capacity. Okay. Now, typically, there's really only a couple of types of slings that you're going to see or that will come up most often. Now, when you're in rehab, some kind of rehab, or some medical professional is giving you a sling for your shoulder after a stroke, which happens a lot. It's usually just that basic standard sling that's going to hold your arm close into your body. You know, the same type of sling that someone who just like sprained their arm, had a sprain or a fracture or something, would typically wear. A very bare bones basic sling. Now, again, this is not something you should be hanging out in outside of those exceptions I just described when you're standing or walking. Okay. Why is that? The reason why, there's a lot of reasons, but the number one reason is slings are going to hold you in this set immobilized position where your arm is internally rotated, meaning close into your body. Your elbow is typically in this flexed position. And what happens physiologically, just over time, with your arm kind of being stuck or spending hours and hours and hours a day in this one position, is that the muscles all start to shorten and get tight. And that's not what you want. You want to keep as much available range of motion as possible in every joint after a stroke. Okay. So that's the number one reason. We do not want to create any tightness and encourage poor movement patterns, right? The other reason is a lot of times people, once your arm is in a sling, it's kind of out of commission. It's not something that you're really thinking about. You're not really thinking, oh, how can I engage with this arm, even though it's not working? Like, can I use it as a stabilizer to weight bear while I do something else? Like, all of that's kind of out the window. So it starts to encourage what we call non-use, which is the opposite of what you want during stroke recovery. You want to be activating and connecting and visualizing and engaging and incorporating that weaker arm at all, whenever possible, regardless if you have active movement happening or not. Okay. Um, the other type of sling is what we call a positioning sling, and it's called the GivMohr Sling. I know I've mentioned it before in other videos. I know I've talked about subluxation before in other videos. But positioning, whether it's with a specialized positioning sling or using, supports under that arm, is just so critical, after a stroke. Now, the GivMohr Sling was actually developed by two occupational therapists. You can order them on Amazon. Just know they are it's a little tricky to get on, but if it's something that you're going, once you do it a few times, and definitely if you have like a therapist or someone who's able to help walk you through that, that's kind of ideal, because once you kind of figure it out and you have it set for you, it gets much easier to put on and take on and off. But again, the sling is only going to be for those of you with that weak or flaccid arm who are going to be doing a lot of standing and walking, right? So if you're what we call an ambulator, a lot of people can have a weak arm, but their legs are pretty good and they're able to work on standing and walking, or they're a functional walker just across the board, but that arm is weak. This is especially for you. You just never want to just let that arm hang. Okay. I know, again, I've talked about this a lot. About shoulder, when I'm talking about shoulder pain, when I'm talking about just positioning in general. Okay, if you're someone who has a weak and flaccid arm and you also aren't quite yet able to do a ton of standing, or you're not walking yet, your number one thing is going to be positioning the arm and shoulder when you're sitting, whether you're sitting in a recliner, where you're sitting on the couch, where you're sitting at the edge of the bed, whether you're sitting on the commode, like on the toilet, like they're in the shower. Like a lot of times people kind of forget about these other settings where you're sitting and that arm is, again, if it's not, you don't have enough strength to stabilize it, it's still going to be pulling. I see this a lot where people are, they get pretty good about, oh, when I'm in my recliner, I know I'm going to fold this blanket or use this pillow or whatever, keep my arm supported. But then you go take a 30-minute shower, sitting on your shower bench, and the arm is just hanging. So you're just going to want to get really good about coming up with different support systems, whether it's a soft support from a pillow or blanket, whether it's an arm trough that you purchase, or a lap tray, or something that you would attach to your wheelchair, a waterproof cover that you put over your soft support, or a special pillow that you're going to use in the shower, something that's going to work when you're sitting on the toilet. Like, you just have to get good and creative about what your systems of support are going to be for your weak arm, depending on where you're sitting, and the same applies for if you're laying in bed. A lot of people think, oh, I'm in the bed, right? Yeah, you're in the bed and the mattress is supporting you, but the arm and shoulder it needs different type of support. You always want to need to have something under that elbow, the forearm, and especially if swelling is an issue in the hands, you're going to want to do some elevation with that as well. So again, the goal here with that weak arm, whether it's totally flaccid and not working, or it's just a little bit weak, or it's weak to the point where you're not able to raise your arm up to at least shoulder height, the goal here is not to just immobilize it and just kind of have it, okay, it's here, it's secure, and it's in a sling. That's not the goal. The goal here is to protect and to support. If you just remember those two words, that's your lens that you're going to put on or look through all the time when you're considering your affected arm, is protect and support. You're protecting against subluxation. You're protecting against pain. You're protecting against stiffness, contracture, tightness of those muscle tissues, right? You're supporting the elbow, the forearm, right? If you support the elbow, the shoulder is supported. That's the key. There are slings you will see out there, these little straps that just go around the wrist, and it's like, yeah, technically your arm is up, but that shoulder, again, is not supported. So check out my video I did about shoulder pain after stroke. And I'm also going to do another one just specifically about shoulder subluxation, because I get a lot of questions about that. And there's definitely some specific techniques and strategies you're going to want to apply to prevent it, and also to manage that as well. Okay. Guys, I really hope this was helpful. Please shoot me a comment if you have any questions at all about your specific situation, and some additional ideas that you could do in different, when you're positioned in different settings, for that arm, because it's not always that intuitive, and I am here to help you if you need it. All right. I really hope this was helpful, you guys, and I will see you next time. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe for more DIY videos to help you along the way in your stroke recovery. Struggling at home? Have a question? Leave me a comment. I'm here to help.